Hey y'all, Wagwan, it's me, V. Welcome back to my channel, Ashes to Ashe, where I talk about Black liberation, decolonization, and challenging the status quo through the lens of afro-pessimism, radical spirituality, and how we as Black folks can use these tools and others to liberate ourselves. Check the links in my bio for my Insta, my TikTok, my Letterboxd, and to schedule a tarot reading with me. I look forward to hearing y'all's feedback in the comment section as always. And yeah, let's get into it. So today I want to talk about the ideas of allyship, of goodness, how true allyship looks more like being a race traitor, and how non-Black allies they function as the enabler in the narcissistic framework of America as the narcissist and Black folks as the perpetual scapegoat. Let's define the terms I'll be using in the video. So I view this framework and this understanding through an afro-pessimist lens that prioritizes Black liberation, Black self-determination, and challenging the status quo that prevents these things. Analysis of America as the narcissist, as Black folk as the scapegoat, and liberals, allies as the enablers. But narcissists are basically those and I guess in this context, right, a government that uses power, control, and external validation while subjugating, oppressing, and creating conditions of harm and violence in order to maintain that power, status, external validation, and control over its citizens. Scapegoat is the role that Black Americans play, where basically the narcissist projects all of its shame, its fury, and its blame onto the scapegoat in order to not only self-soothe and remove themselves from the shame cycle, but to offer up a literal scapegoat for the violence that is enacted by the narcissist in the government. Liberals are those who in America usually vote Democrat or left-leaning. For left-leaning politicians, they desire and they vote for social welfare programs, promoting social equality, specifically around social issues, but do not fight for nor view it practical to fight for fundamental changes to the government, to the status quo, when they're engaging with politics and society through their worldview. They do so without threatening or critically critiquing the functions of capitalism, the functions of imperialism, the functions of white supremacy and anti-blackness. And they often engage in respectability politics and refuse to critically engage with the history or cultural matrix, Yurgu by Marimpa Ali, of this culture or this society. There was a phrase that one of my friends shared with me, that you cut a liberal and a fascist bleeds, and that's the understanding that there is no fundamental change, and that the liberal position in modern day politics in America exists to make sure that the functions of capitalism, of imperialism, of white supremacy, of anti-blackness are not fundamentally challenged, and they, like I said, engage in respectability politics. Self-identified good person. So this is the average person who goes to work, they've earned their degree, they pay their bills, they do not rock the boat, right? They don't commit any violent crimes. They may smoke a little bit of pot, after work, whether that's legally or not so legally. They've done all the things that they're supposed to do that are expected of them by our society. However, they don't do anything consistently or even on a daily basis, right? Whether that's internally or externally, that actively challenges the status quo, that actively confronts anti-blackness and white supremacy, whether that's in themselves, in their communities, in their families. They don't seek to educate themselves on the political realities of the system and how that is internalized in everyday people and externalized in the way that our society works, right? Every day is business as usual, and because they do not actively commit any harm towards a group of people, this is why they view themselves as a good person. This is not specific to non-black folks. Black folks can, of course, be, what's the word? Not victims. Black folks can be perpetuators of this too. And this is what I call passive harm. For the average good person, the most politically aware, active, engaged thing that they do is vote every 4, if not every 2 years in a gubernatorial election. Yeah, so they are perpetuators of what I call passive harm, kind of unseen. It's kind of like the idea of you would never take a bottle out of a baby's mouth, right? But you do believe that infant formula should be locked and sealed at a Walmart because, God forbid, someone steals to feed their infants, right? We're cooked. Allies are similar, if not the same. They are self-identified good people who, while they may not identify with a specific marginalized group, whether that's black folks, whether that's gay folks, whether that's trans folks, whether that's disabled folks, right? They don't outwardly discriminate. They don't actively oppose that group's existence. They might even donate. They might even, support and uplift. They will not, however, sacrifice their comfort nor their social status and their access to privilege and power to disrupt the systems of injustice and violence and create communities and systems, not just of equality, but of equity, of justice, and a redistribution of power and safety. Really, my bar is very, very high, but I don't think we would be in the position globally, but most specifically in America, if most people had the bar that I had. But hey, what do I know? Enablers. So enablers in the narcissistic framework, there's the non-narcissistic parent is the enabler, and they do not always engage actively in the harm, but they passively witness it. So they passively allow it and passively co-sign it, thus permitting and encouraging, enabling the behavior and violence of the narcissist, which again is passive harm. Key point being that they do not do anything to relinquish their status, to relinquish their power, to challenge themselves or others, to educate themselves or others. They are content with being passively good. We've defined these terms, right? What would the real work of an ally actually entail? If you ask me, the real work of an ally would entail understanding, a desire to, and an understanding of the systems of oppression, of discrimination, why we've been taught to view specific groups in a specific way, and how that feeds and benefits the powers that be, right? The social structure, the social hierarchy. Secondly, they would understand how they benefit from a system of belief and thus a system of power through education, right? They would understand, what does anti-blackness entail? How do I benefit from it? And how do I actively engage in it or passively allow it in my day-to-day life? 3, they would challenge themselves and others and the status quo. And through that challenging, and I mean openly and outwardly, they would work then to relinquish elements of their own power, of their own status, of their own social capital that are upheld by these same systems of discrimination, and through their application handed over, right, to black folks, to marginalized folks, which would then slowly but surely create a society in which there is a redistribution, not of wealth necessarily, well, of wealth, yes, but of power, and of social capital and justice. First of all, if you're loud and proud as an ally, I'm scared of you. Because why are you so loud and proud? If you were the first person to tell me, yeah, I'm not racist, but yes, you are. Yes, you are. This is work that most are not willing to do, that most are not actively doing, especially with the lack of media literacy and political education that has been happening in this country for decades. And so most people have not earned the title of allyship, but they've given it to themselves without actually doing any of the work, which is difficult, it's lengthy, it can be embarrassing, and it is lifelong. And so they're able to soothe their internal, if not specifically white guilt, by giving themselves these titles. I'm an ally, I'm a good person, while still upholding the status quo and their positions of power within it. I'd argue again that passive goodness is just complacently. And through this lens, a lot of folks that view themselves as allies and as good people are actually not. Because if you feel the need to proclaim to me while I'm minding my business, right, that you're such an ally and you just are so down with black people, first of all, you're not. Second of all, who told you you were an ally? Malcolm X? If Malcolm X told you specifically that you're an ally, I believe you. You got it. If not, specifically in the United States, doing what is just, what is righteous, has often been grounds to land you in jail, to become socially ostracized. And when I speak of whiteness as a political ideology and whiteness as a political identity, I'm speaking of white supremacy culture, and a bit of neurotypical culture, that requires that it's rooted in never being direct, never addressing the elephant in the room, prioritizing the comfort and the peace of the people in these positions of power, seeking power and status over justice and any sense of shame, guilt, or discomfort. This is why myself and others like me have often been labeled as troublemakers, for speaking truth to power, for calling out, saying the quiet part out loud, for calling out the bullshit, when in reality, all we're doing is not only calling attention to injustices, actively refusing to stay silent and play a role, be complacent in this grand play of injustice, of what's the opposite of righteousness, child, right? Of refusing to allow wrong to happen before our eyes just because it's the easiest thing to do. Because of all this, I believe that it's more apt, especially in this current time, for non-black folks, specifically white folks, to be race traders rather than allies. I'm specifically talking about becoming a race trader to that ideology of white supremacy, that requires, if y'all have seen the movie Sinners, basically Remy the Vampire is a perfect, beautiful example of this. White supremacy requires that all other identities that refuse to conform, that will not assimilate, are cast aside so that whiteness as a political identity, as a political ideology, can take precedent. It's essentially grand people pleasing, except the people that you're pleasing are in fact the narcissistic American state and the American government against not only your interests, but the interests of black liberation and black self-determination and justice for black folks and all people globally, worldwide. What does that look like in real time? In real time, that can look like speaking up against anti-blackness, even if it's a family member, even if it's a friend, even if it makes you uncomfortable. That looks like shutting up. That looks like shutting up and listening to black folks when they speak about their experiences, decentering yourself, calling out and speaking up against anti-blackness, inward, right, in yourself, in your family, in your communities, in your teachers. It means donating. It means giving time, energy, and resources to black folks, to black-led organizers, black-led causes. It means that if you want to go to a protest and you're non-black, you should be in the very front of that line to defend not only the cause that you're protesting against, but the black folks that are there. This looks like not expecting black folks to show up or speak up about certain things, right? It means educating at the very first step yourself on what these systems look like, what your role is, and how you can abdicate your role in order to create a more just society for not only black folks and other marginalized folks, for yourself. Because if geese are on the menu, The ducks should be scared. Let's begin with relinquishing the self-identified title of ally and potentially embracing the identity of race traitor. Some question: how can you, as a non-black person, work to educate yourself on anti-blackness, on white supremacy, on the political and cultural components of anti-blackness and white supremacy? Black folks, where do you find yourself shying away from holding yourself accountable, from holding others accountable, and standing up for not just your rights, but the rights of others? Non-black folks and black folks alike, how can you challenge the status quo in your daily life? And what is one practice, one book, one speaker, one podcast that you can watch or dedicate yourself to that will work to create a more equitable and just society? As always, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. I hope this tickled a piece of your brain and gave you something to think about. I look forward to seeing y'all soon. Be well. Peace.